sixth graders. This is Mr. Scrow from Hillside School. Today, we are going to continue our music history journey and examine storytelling in music more carefully. As far as we can tell, music may be one of the oldest art forms in the world. While we'll never be able to hear the songs and chants of prehistoric peoples, although that would be totally awesome, we have found flutes in the archaeological record that date back to roughly 42,000 years ago. It's assumed that music itself predates these rare and luckily preserved artifacts. So music is an ancient part of humanity, but what is its purpose? Why do you listen to music? Does music need to relate to other stories, ideas, or the arts? Or does music simply exist for its own sake? That debate became very important to Europeans of the early 19th century, especially in Germany, where it was embodied through composers like Ludwig van Beethoven. The Romantic era was ushered in during Beethoven's lifetime. While most historians categorize him as a classical composer, Beethoven's music shows shades of Romanticism. As one example, Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 is a typical example of his music. Music composed for music's sake, just to make something beautiful. Whereas Beethoven's Symphony No. 6 has more romantic traits because the music was inspired by Germany's beautiful countryside, which evokes another one of Romantic era's traits, pride in your country, or what we call nationalism. More on that another day. The main point is that these two symphonies were written for different reasons. The Fifth Symphony just to make something beautiful, and the Sixth Symphony to evoke or respond to a theme, in this case, the beautiful German countryside. On this slide, you will listen to a short clip from Beethoven's iconic Fifth Symphony, and then a clip from the Sixth Symphony, where Beethoven recreated the sound of a thunderstorm using only orchestral instruments. So, what is the purpose of music? Let's find out. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify the difference between program music and absolute music. Beginning in the 1600s, during a time called the Baroque period, the orchestra was born. Composers wrote music for this group of instruments that was meant to entertain an audience. It was around this point in history when the concert halls were built and people began to attend formal concerts. Around 1725, Italian Baroque composer Antonio Vivaldi wrote a very famous piece of music for orchestra called The Four Seasons. As its title implies, each part of the work is supposed to describe a certain time of the year. This is pretty abstract, though, as it's not exactly easy to capture what a season sounds like if you are only using orchestral instrument sounds. Also, during this time, composers began collaborating with playwrights and artists to create operas. Operas were the first form of musical theater. More on that another day. The point that I'm trying to make here is that we can clearly see two distinct reasons that music was written in this period of history. Music for music's sake, just because music is rich, complex, and beautiful. And on the other hand, music depicting moods, images, stories, and characters, such as in an opera or Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Because this was a time before television, movies, and YouTube, entertainment was always provided by live musicians or actors. Sometimes composers wrote music that was supposed to evoke a certain kind of scene, story, or emotion. Other pieces were just meant to be enjoyed without a narrative to go along. Romantic composers began debating the purpose of music by categorizing their compositions into one or two groups. The first category is called program music. Program music is that which is about something. It has a theme, a subject, and a plot. In artistic terms, we may say that it is representational, which means that this kind of music is written in connection to something else, something extra musical. Enjoy a little piece called Aquarium from Carnival of the Animals by Camille Saint-Saëns. On the opposite end of the spectrum is absolute music. While program music has a subject, absolute music is about absolutely nothing. It is non-representational or abstract. Absolute music does not represent a story, an idea, or anything outside of the music itself. This music is for music's sake, composed purely for the sake of expression and to explore truths about how music makes you feel. Let's start with the work by German composer Johann Sebastian Bach. Bach worked primarily in the 18th century, which means he predates the Romantic era. However, we can see the foundations of absolute music in his work. Chromatic, Fantasia, and Fugue in D minor is one of Bach's masterpieces of early absolute music, composed approximately between 1717 and 1723 for the harpsichord. It is based on the repetition of chords in a chromatic scale. In this piece, Bach used these chromatic chords to create a captivating composition. But let me ask you, what is the subject? The title gives us no clues, as both chromatic fantasia and fugue are genres of music, not subjects. Although Bach technically predates the formal debate on absolute music, he was already anticipating that movement by composing songs that rejected the pretense on a subject so that the listener could focus only on the technical aspects of the composition. Symphony Number 3 in F major by German composer Brahms is another wonderful example of romantic absolute music. Considering what we've talked about, pay attention to how Brahms evokes strong emotions through the fourth movement of his composition, which is not connected to any physical subject or context. Also, note that while Bach wrote for a single instrument, Brahms uses a full symphonic orchestra to create layers of emotional depth. Enjoy. The distinction between absolute and program music is one of the most basic divisions of music. Music either has a subject or it is music for music's sake. So, how do you know which one you're listening to? Ideally, you know because you're familiar with the composer. You're listening to live symphonic music within a formal setting, and the conductor will tell you. However, that's not generally how we listen to music. We hear music on the radio, out of context, in commercials or television shows, and everywhere else. So, how do you know if a piece of music is absolute or programmatic? Sometimes you simply won't know. You can still look for clues, though. One indicator is the presence of lyrics. Lyrics tell a story and present a subject, so we know that they are part of program music. Notice that we said lyrics, not voice. Absolute music can use the human voice as an instrument without creating lyrics or using a subject. Another clue you can look for is the title. If a song is titled something like Summer Evening, The Ballad of Romeo and Juliet, or even Main Character's Theme, then you know it's program music. It is related to something extra musical. It is representative. On the other hand, have you ever wondered why some music has a generic title? Symphony in D minor, concerto in E, or quartet for strings are all titles appropriate for absolute music. There's no title because the music does not have a subject. It is music for its own sake, and that's it. Listen now to one of Edvard Grieg's famous songs called Morning from the Peer Gynt Suite. We should mention that few composers work exclusively in one kind of music or the other. Most are trained or at least familiar with both kinds of music. Sometimes program music is more appropriate, while other times the composer simply wants to explore how music makes people feel without a greater subject. It all depends on what your purpose is for composing. Head on over to the Google Classroom and pick up your exit ticket. You should do your exit ticket now. You're given time in class at this time to do your exit ticket. While you're taking your exit ticket, enjoy an example of program music by Camille Saint-Saëns called Flamingos, as interpreted by Disney's Fantasia.
These drawing boards have been the birthplace of some of the most beloved animal characters of all time. So it's no surprise that the artist chose for our next segment The Carnival of the Animals by Camille Saint-Saëns. Here, the sensitive strains of impressionistic music combine with the subtle artistry of the animator to finally answer that age-old question, what is man's relationship to nature? Oh, sorry. That age-old question, what would happen if you gave a yo-yo to a flock of flamingos? Who wrote this?